and also often in in-depth analytical discussions, we arrive at a point where we ask ourselves, but what is this really costing us? We might speculate that the increased number of taxis on the road is shortening each of us' lifespan by the extraordinary amounts of stress that they inflict on us. Or we might spend less on fighting crime than the increased wage bill we would incur if we paid the police a proper salary and attracted better people to the force. The report we're launching this evening delves into one of these kinds of questions. What does our homophobia actually cost us as a country? And how is it preventing us from fulfilling our developmental potential? I'm Diana Thorburn, Capri's Director of Research, and my role here is to welcome you to our public forum and launch of our report on the economic cost of sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination in Jamaica. As a public policy think tank, the Caribbean Policy Research Institute's mission is to explore pressing, pertinent questions about what holds back Jamaica and the Caribbean's development with evidence-based research, and out of that research, proposing policy recommendations that are grounded in the existing political economy. When we started out 12 years ago, most of our research was on economic issues. Today, our main areas of focus are the economy, sustainability as regards the environment and energy, social issues including citizen security and governance. It is in this context that we conceptualized and carried out the research that we present today, which falls under two of our areas of focus, the economy and social issues, by asking the question, what is the economic cost of Jamaica's homophobia? Is there a price for holding on to discriminatory attitudes and practices that, depending on one's perspective, belong to the underside of our history and culture or seek to preserve our morality and values? The research that informed the report was carried out under the project supporting participatory governance and supporting inclusive and participatory governance, which was funded by the European Union, who is one of our valued development partners at Capri. We're also very thankful to the EU because it was through their posting a young Finnish man here in Jamaica that his wife, Sarah Maria Viri, who was a principal researcher on this project, came to us at Capri. She produced an outstanding, meticulous, and thorough report, one that we're extremely proud of. The evening's proceedings are as follows. We will have remarks from Mr. Eckfeldt, the Minister Counselor, Head of Political Press and Information at the European Union Mission here in Kingston. Then Dr. Damien King, Capri's Executive Director, will share the findings of the research. His presentation will be followed by a panel discussion, including a question and answer session. For the panel discussion, we have brought together Dr. Terry Carell-Reid, a TV and event host, former Miss Jamaica World, and an advocate for youth and women's empowerment, environmentally conscious, sustainable development, and social justice. Mr. Javian Nelson, Executive Director of Equality for All Foundation, an organization that works on issues that affect the LGBTQ community, such as violence, lack of access to justice, lack of access to jobs, as well as issues related to women's rights. In his work and advocacy, Javian is raising the bar of intersectionality in the Jamaican political discourse. Dr. Michael Abrams is an obstetrician and gynecologist, a newspaper columnist, a comedian, a poet, a songwriter, and a performer. Throughout all of his various roles, he is a passionate advocate for gender equality. Mrs. Donna Duncan Scott is the Group Executive Director of Culture and Human Development at Jamaica Money Market Brokers, a business that is well recognized as one of Jamaica's most progressive and innovative companies, particularly in the areas of human resources and development. Her zeal for empowerment and transformation and her decades of experience in corporate Jamaica suit her well for our panel this evening. The panel discussion and Q&A will be moderated by Capri's citizen security researcher, Joanna Callan, and we will be using a technology called Slido this evening. It's an app that you can log on to by going to slido.com. The Wi-Fi here is up there. I'm not going to try and say it. With the password. So you can log on to the Wi-Fi here, go to slido.com, enter the event code Capri, and then you'll be in this space that we're going to be here tonight. We're going to be prioritizing the questions that come through Slido. It's a very democratic way of getting questions up without disrupting the flow of the conversation and the Q&A. You can post a question and you can vote on other people's questions. And you do not have to share your name if you don't want to. There are also a few polls that we'll be conducting through Slido that we would like you to respond to. Your responses are completely anonymous. You don't even have the choice to give your name for those. Those of you who are active on Twitter, please do share your thoughts about this evening's proceedings during and after the event using the hashtag #PayingForPrejudice. We at Capri are delighted to have you here with us at this event, an event which we hope will be a turning point in an important movement towards a more open, progressive, innovative, and prosperous Jamaica.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Thornburn. I understand that all protocols are observed, so I would say good evening, good friends. My ambassador, Małgorzata Wasilewska, just came back from Brussels, and yesterday we sat together in order to look at the week because there are so many different functions, and she was torn because she had to go to another event. And so I said, no, I want to take this one. And for me, these issues are particularly important for my ambassador as well. She is very definitely on the front line of defending human rights. But I'm particularly pleased to be here this evening. So on behalf of the European Union, we're extremely proud to be here and to be part of this launch of this very important report, The Economic and Societal Cost of Sexuality-Based Discrimination in Jamaica. We are proud to be associated with this report because it draws attention to a significant impediment to the full enjoyment of fundamental human rights and achievement of sustainable development for the benefit of all. In addition, it provides a basis for our understanding of how discrimination affects this group of Jamaicans and the country's effort to achieve economic growth and development. The EU is committed to promoting and protecting human rights, including the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex persons. Our support to JFLAG and other right defenders and our participation in advocacy events regularly shows this determination and our commitment. I see friends here in the crowd who participated together with me a few weeks ago in the Montego Bay Pride Walk. And it was a very strong, intense feeling of being there with very, very courageous people demonstrating the rights of all Jamaicans to be out in the streets and to be who they are, ordinary human beings with their rights and the desires for life and development. And I was particularly proud of being invited, of being there, together with my Canadian colleagues and my US colleagues as well. In addition, we are in full support of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, and through our development programs, we're supporting government, including Jamaica, to achieve their own development goals. We also believe that having access to reliable data is essential for sound decision-making. The EU is actively promoting human rights for all in the UN, but also together with other nations. As the EU civil servant, I have standing instructions to stand up for human rights for all, and particularly for LGBTI rights. And I'm very proud to do that. Jamaica is one of 72 countries where sexual orientation laws continue to criminalize same-sex acts. As in many other parts of the world, here in Jamaica, cultural, traditional, or religious values continue to be used to justify discrimination, bullying, and exclusion of LGBTI persons from active participation. Unfortunately, we also saw that in Africa, certain nations have even gone back to reintroducing the death penalty for same-sex acts. And when it comes to religious arguments, I just want to point out in my own home country, Sweden, the Lutheran Church is today, since several years ago, marrying people of the same sex. And the society find it perfectly natural. And this is how it is. But as you will see from the findings presented in this report, discrimination against persons based on sexual orientation robs the country of the added value and contribution that the affected persons can bring to national development, making the country poorer for their exclusion. This report tells us that those of us who are committed to advocating for equality for all have a lot more to do. In this regard, the EU, hand in hand with member states, will continue to support the necessary work of these advocates and organizations like CAPRI that provide reliable and timely data and analysis to guide their advocacy. So thank you. For our part, the European Union, through its partnership and funding support, will continue to demonstrate its commitment to defend the human rights and dignity for all, create an environment where LGBTI persons can live free from discrimination and stigmatization and have the same opportunity to make their contribution to national development. Here I want to point out that 2 active current prime ministers in the EU are of LGBT inclination. Luxembourg and Ireland, fully respected by the majority of the population, contributing to a good democratic development of the country, good economic development of the country. And previously, just recently, the Prime Minister of Iceland, also a lady well respected of belonging to the LGBTI community. And in Serbia also, the present Prime Minister is also a woman married to another woman. So things are improving. I think that also when we look at Jamaica, Jamaicans have to realize the fantastic contribution to tourism that people, tourists of LGBTI inclination, contribute to the wealth of this country. Every day in this country, in silence, Jamaicans, without knowing it, are confronted with the services, benefit from the services of the military, of the police, medical, legal professions, teachers of LGBTI inclinations. And they serve fantastically well. And without them, the country would be so much poorer. It would be nice for them, however, to be able to know that they could go out freely and tell their communities about their inclination without fear of harassment. The economic argument to stop this silly discrimination is the same that we've applied to integrate women into society. The talent pool of 50% of the population, we realized in modern society, we can't be without it. So, and we also, it has been proven nowadays when we see women, young girls at university, they represent 55, 60% of all the students. They would today dominate the middle management situation in many countries. And eventually, they will also, I think, dominate the higher echelons also. So men have to be a little bit more proactive at school and study a little bit better. But the same argument of integrating women into professional life has to be applied also for the LGBTI community, because they also have a fantastic potential to come up with that is already tapped into but more could be done if they felt less discriminated. That's an economic argument. However, the most important argument is not the economic one. It's the argument of not fearing. It's the argument of being able to feel that my human rights are respected, my dignity is respected. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to say this. It came straight from the heart, and I wish you a fantastic evening. Thank you so much.
This is, at its core, a human rights issue. We're going to be talking about the economic cost, but please nobody get the impression that our argument here is to make a case based on economic cost, as if you can say, well, that's not a sufficiently great economic cost, so we can continue to be hostile and bigoted. It is fundamentally a human rights issue. However, what Capri is in the business of doing is connecting your policy choices to economic outcomes. And we are here to point out that if as a society we want to continue to make a policy choice that is based on not respecting human rights, that is based on a bigoted attitude, it's going to cost you. And it's going to cost you a lot. There is a considerable amount of research that looks at the various costs of having an unwelcoming attitude to marginalized and ostracized groups. In relation to looking at the cost of poor social attitudes towards the LGBT community, there has been an analysis in India that showed that it costs as much as 1% of GDP. Now, 1% might sound like a small number to you, but consider that Jamaica has been struggling for a long time to generate economic growth. And the best we've been able to do over the last several years is about 1% growth per year. So this alone can double our rate of economic growth. That is the context in which we are looking at this issue. We have analyzed the various costs, the various economic problems associated with our current attitude to marginalizing the LGBT community into 4 categories. We're trying to search to see what could make up this 1%. What are the different aspects of the cost that we need to look at? And we'll put them into 4 categories. We're going to start by looking at the cost in terms of mental health. The incidence of mental health in the general population is around 21%. The incidence of mental health in the LGBT community is 69%. It is more than triple the rate in the general population. That arithmetic tells you that more than half of the mental health issues amongst LGBT people is due solely to our discrimination. Treating mental health costs Jamaica about $5 billion each year, only a third of which is the public cost. The rest is a private cost. So that $5 billion gives you a sense of what would be both the public and private savings that could be put to other uses. if we were able to have a better attitude towards this marginalized group. That means discrimination alone is adding about $175 million per year to the cost of treating mental health issues due to discrimination against LGBT people. That's the first category. That's the smallest one. It gets worse. When we look at the cost in terms of physical health, we get to bigger numbers. And here we have confined our analysis just to HIV, which is not the only physical health consequence of discrimination against LGBT people. There are two issues here that we want to look at. One is that what discrimination does to the likelihood of being able to get successfully treated. In a climate of hostility, LGBT people are reluctant to even seek out information on HIV, because seeking out information on HIV is a marker that you're a member of that community. So you don't have enough information to begin with. Secondly, even to the extent that you have the information, you are less likely to go in and be diagnosed. Even if you get the information and you are diagnosed, then you have to go and get treatment. And having been diagnosed, you're once again reluctant to try to get your HIV treated. All of which raises the risk of contracting HIV in the first place and raises the incidence of HIV in that community. Each untreated case of HIV itself costs $500,000. It costs $500,000 to treat someone once they contract HIV. It is estimated that each HIV positive person is likely to pass it on to 2 others in the absence of treatment. Carrying that all the way downstream means an additional 10 persons will ultimately become infected because 1 person is not properly treated. When you add all that together, at taking account of our estimate that an additional 7,000 persons become infected simply because of the discrimination, that in the absence of the discrimination, those would have been diagnosed and gotten treated. Multiplying all of that together, we end up with a cost of $35 billion for each cohort that is not treated. 35 billion Jamaican dollars. That's one element of the problem. A second element of the problem is created by the legislation under the heading of unnatural offenses. The embarrassing buggery law. This creates an additional problem because there are 2 groups of public sector workers and NGOs who are now affected because the existence of the law makes them reluctant to engage in the activities that can reduce the incidence. Public health workers fear that they're assisting law breaking by treating those who may be members of this community. And those who work in the field of promoting safe sex are also concerned about assisting law breaking, however unreasonably. And that too interferes with reducing the incidence of HIV. The tragedy here is that we have examples from other countries and other arenas of HIV infection that tell us that public health interventions are effective in keeping down the incidence of HIV. A good comparison is the efforts to treat HIV and the incidence of HIV among sex workers, where interventions have been shown to reduce the incidence of HIV by 2/3. A similar scale of result is possible with the LGBT community, but not achieved because of the discrimination that we perpetrate. So, taking account of all of these factors, we are foregoing $35 billion of economic benefit. There are also effects on the labor market that we need to take into account. Now, this operates in a number of different aspects. The first is that we reduce the size of our effective labor force because of our discrimination. Some of it is lost to migration. One survey revealed that 75%, 3/4 of those who identify as members of the LGBT community have seriously considered migration. Half of that number have advanced degrees. So we lose a part of the labor force that way. We lose another part of the labor force because there is discrimination in the hiring of gays and lesbians. That employers have said that they would not hire an openly gay person because they do not support that orientation. The number of employers who stated that were half of those surveyed. Half of employers would not employ an openly gay or lesbian person. A third of employers said that that discovery is reason alone for dismissal. Now, this gives you an idea of the kind of stress that members of that community are under, which explains the incidence of mental health that we referred to earlier. All of these factors intertwine. We estimate that either because of involuntary unemployment or because of voluntary withdrawal from the labor force for fear of discovery and for mental stress, that Jamaica is foregoing $11 billion worth of GDP because of the unemployment created, voluntary and involuntary. It's adding up. The second element of our productive capacity that is affected is what we might call the misallocation of resources, because people are not in the jobs that they would do best. LGBT people do not end up in the jobs that they're going to perform best, either because of the same discrimination that refuses to hire them in the first place, doesn't give them promotions that they are due, or put them in the areas where they are most likely to be most productive. Second of all, members of that community themselves are going to be reluctant to be in high visibility positions. And so they end up misallocating themselves. So we have the wrong people in the wrong places. This explains why we are not getting the most out of our labor force. There is also another factor, that in the context of feeling the oppression that comes from the workplace that you're in, plus the fear of being outed, even those who are in positions that they want to be in underperform. They are not able to devote all of their cognitive ability to being as productive as they want to be because they are navigating a hostile society and a hostile workplace. there's a third element. There's a third element to explain why we are not getting the most out of those members of the LGBT community that are in the labor force. And it is underinvestment in human capital. If you are not going to be able to work to your full potential, then that means it means that the returns to your investment in education make it not worth it. So from the level of secondary and tertiary education, they underinvest in developing their human capital because they are not able to maximize the return on that investment. So we end up with less human capital than we otherwise would. And to the extent that you want to indulge in stereotypes about creativity, we are probably losing a particularly important part of our human capital. Now, not only do we have this loss of labor force productivity showing up in different aspects of the labor force, the smaller numbers because of unemployment and migration, the low productivity because of misallocation, and the reduction in human capital, we are not talking about a handful of the members of the labor force. We estimate that Jamaica, like most countries, 7% of the labor force are members of the LGBT community. This is not an insignificant part of the labor force. So we are talking about a large loss of our productive capacity. But those are the costs that have to do particularly with the members of the community themselves. To the extent to which the rest of the society would like to say, well, that is the loss of their productivity. That is not really my problem. Investment, particularly foreign investment, is increasingly influenced by a country's human rights record. And our human rights record is glaringly reflected in our attitude, in our official attitude to the LGBT community. More and more investors, especially foreign investors, explicitly look at a country's human rights record before they embarrass themselves by making an investment in a country from which they subsequently have to pull out of and not realize the benefits of their investment. And this is true of investment in any business activity. It is even more glaring as production, as the structure of production in the world becomes more knowledge intensive, as more and more industries depend on knowledge intensive production. And investment by those in those industries where knowledge is becoming increasingly important is sensitive to diversity, is sensitive to tolerance and inclusiveness. And so not only are we probably attracting less investment than we otherwise would, but we are attracting even less of knowledge-intensive foreign investment, where more and more of the world's production is going. And then there's tourism. Now, rather obviously, Jamaica is not on the top of the list of LGBT tourists themselves who are looking for places in the world to spend a week or two. Our reputation takes care of that. But this is happening at the same time that more and more parts of the world are actively chasing what they refer to as the pink dollar because there is so much of it. Because there is so much money to be made by accommodating the increasing wealth of the LGBT community worldwide, while we are shunning it. And that would be bad enough. But there is increasing evidence that even non-LGBT tourists are sensitive to going to countries that are demonstrating a level of intolerance. There was one survey that revealed in the UK that 2/3 of the general tourist market said that they were reluctant to go to a country that was hostile to gays and lesbians. So let's think about that as we plan the future of the tourism industry. So when we put all of this together, we get an appreciation of the scale of the economic cost that our historical and current attitudes to the LGBT community is costing Jamaica. No surprise that our report concludes that any country which wants to maximize the productivity of its workforce and to harness the full potential of its people towards economic growth and development must proactively reduce discrimination against groups of people who are excluded from full participation. Whether those groups are blacks in the US in the 1960s, Dalits in India, or the LGBT community in Jamaica. It's the same issue and the same economic cost. Accordingly, to take advantage of the economic potential that we have here outlined, Capri's report makes the following recommendations. Repeal sections 76, 77, and 79 of the Offences Against the Person Act. Those are the clauses that speak to the unnatural offenses. 2, amend the gender-specific definitions of intercourse and rape in the Sexual Offences Act. 3, enact anti-discrimination legislation that explicitly includes sexual orientation or gender identity as a basis for discrimination. Our existing framework speaks to discrimination and speaks to particular groups against which discrimination is illegal, but omits sexual orientation and gender identity as such a basis. 4, incorporate comprehensive sexuality education into the school curriculum. Comprehensive sexuality education, including that in relation to the LGBT community. Include LGBT students as typical victims of bullying in the school safety policy guidelines. We have the guidelines, and the guidelines guide those who have to deal with school bullying by identifying who are the typical victims of bullying. But curiously, exclude those who are the greatest victims of that bullying as a group to look out for. 6, introduce into the training curriculum of school counselors, healthcare workers, and police officers a syllabus for dealing with matters involving LGBT people, so that those to whom members of the LGBT community go to seek out refuge and comfort and support themselves are not so trained to deal with those matters and become part of the problem. And finally, We would like to have private sector companies adopt diversity policies that explicitly include sexual orientation and gender identity. And we are asking that the private sector organization of Jamaica be the entity to lead that effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. King, for that presentation. At this time, I'm going to invite the panelists to take their seats on stage. I would like to also remind the audience that we're using our Slido app this evening at sli.do. Okay, the instructions are on screen. So the event code is Capri. You can post your questions. You can vote up questions. The most voted question will reach to the top of the list to be asked. We are asking, if you can, to put your name. I'll acknowledge you by name and ask you to stand and give your question. So, to start the discussion, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give a 3 to 5 minute response to the presentation and the report. Starting with you, Jevion.
Oh. All right, hello everyone. So it is no secret that Jamaica is known globally for the high levels of homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia that is perpetrated against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people every single day here in Jamaica. There are countless documentaries, news reports, studies, etc., and other publications that have been produced over the years, locally, regionally, and internationally, about the experiences of the LGBT community here. Sadly, a significant number of those, as significant as they have been, have not necessarily discussed the implications of the experiences LGBT people have faced thoroughly. Consequently, up until recently, most of the discussion has centered around HIV and violence in a very, very limited way. Capri's research on the cost of sexuality-based discrimination is therefore very timely and well needed, and so I'm especially pleased that critical issues like mental health, access to education and employment and related issues are included in this study. These issues, though regularly mentioned, are often sidelined in the conversations about LGBT inclusion. However, their impact on the LGBT community's sense of belonging in Jamaica is undeniable. We therefore welcome this move by Capri and hope that this will inspire other Jamaican researchers to take up the mantle and conduct further research on a broad range of issues affecting the Jamaican LGBT community. Research like this, we believe, helps to not only document the experiences of and challenges of the LGBT community here, but it looks at the impact of homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia and what it does to our national development. It bridges the gap between the often discussed social issues with the lived economic realities of Jamaicans. And we know very well that the LGBT community here face homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia in their daily lives. And so we now have clear evidence that show the economic cost of those prejudices that they experience daily. We view this research as a watershed moment in our country and hope that this will further research like this, because that they'll be given the necessary funding and support to explore all the ways in which LGBT Jamaicans are affected by prejudice in the country as we continue to work towards our effort to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, do business, and, as the Prime Minister had said last year, retire. Finally, I must say that this study represents an opportunity for us to gain further insights on the LGBT community, to facilitate further discussions about the broader implications of our deeply held prejudices, and for the knowledge gained as a result to be used to ensure interventions or programs or policies, whatever initiative that we do can be evidence-based or evidence-informed, and that it will fully consider the realities and needs of the Jamaican LGBT community as we seek to improve the human rights situation here and make Jamaica a place of choice for everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Do we just continue?
Sure, Terry, thank you.
At first, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. At first, I was extremely happy that he started first, but then know that he has something prepared, maybe not. You know, I've had the opportunity. First of all, let me just say, job well done to Capri. I don't think we really truly acknowledged the type of research that was done here. You know, and I've had the opportunity of hosting quite a number of events this year, hundreds maybe. And a lot of these events speak about Jamaica and Jamaica's positioning in the global market and becoming competitive. And of course, the posture is that we're not just a place of sea, sand, sun, and fun, but that we want to be in the industries of technology and health and finance and consumer retail. And we speak about Vision 2030, that we want Jamaica to be this amazing place for visitors as well as locals. But then how can we truly realize this paradise if we're actually going to exclude a community? How do we really get up every single day in media, because media is also a part of this revolving door, media and all of the messages that are sent out where the LGBT community are concerned, we see them in a very negative light. And here it is, we're speaking about the cost, but really and truly, it comes down to just respecting people as one human to another. So the thing I love about the Capri research is that it's not here to set an agenda, because people like to think that. It doesn't have a motive. It doesn't have an agenda. It is simply to say that even though we may have different backgrounds, different beliefs, we have to agree that people are people, and that they deserve the dignity and the right to love who they want to love and to be productive citizens to their country. So what do I face as Terry Carell, who has a very massive online following, and people who write to me every single day, the youngsters between the ages of 13 to 17 who send me photos of their arms and the cuts that they create almost every single day because they're unloved by their family members, who are more ashamed to say that they have a homosexual relative, those who are abused physically by these parents or guardians, then they're abused by the very teachers and coaches at school, and they're abused by their classmates. And when it is found out that they're also cutters, guess what? They're bullied even more. The amount of them who want to kill themselves, oh, there is a cost. But the emotional cost is something that we probably can't even quantify. The girl or the boy who runs away, who is then vulnerable to other types of sexual harassment and molestation, trying to find love, which usually ends up in contracting HIV. Well, I've heard them all. And you know what? I've heard it said about women and the discrimination that women experience and the gender inequality, is that people say for women to do well in the workforce and in society, we need the men to step up and assist. Have you heard it said? The LGBTQ plus community cannot do it on their own. They already know the type of challenges and adversities that they face. So what they actually need is they need for the persons around them, the heterosexuals, and not just heterosexuals who are very close to the LGBT community, but those who are not, to also lend their voices and to lend their platforms, because the community will not be able to do it for themselves. So again, I commend Capri. I commend them. And the next time you even hear someone speaking about somebody from that community in a very derogatory manner, it is your responsibility as a decent human, as a decent citizen to not entertain it and to educate and hope that that person will now have a change of heart or mindset where the community is concerned. So I thank you for the invitation, and again, congratulations to Capri and the researcher for doing such a fantastic job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Carrie. Donald?
Great. Okay, hi everybody. It is a pleasure to be here. I feel so special. You know what I mean, from, as a company, to be able to, because that's what we stand for this, right? We stand for this. We are a love company. And it's not just a talking, it's a real thing. So I wanted to read some of, from our, just share, I want to share that this is a real thing for us as JMMB. I want to say that I see this as, I hope to, that this is a special day that makes a difference in the life of Jamaica going forward. I really do hope so, because I think that the vision that all of us really want for Jamaica, if we really penetrate it, it does not include discrimination. You understand? It just don't include it. But we really have to do that work. And at JMMB, because we are not just having our values on the wall, we're living it, right? We want to live it. We are clear that, first of all, we're all human beings. We share a common humanity. We're all part of one family. Nobody is greater or lesser than the other. And we are all to be valued, heard, and cared for. Full stop. Right? So that is where we come from. So given that now, our job is to, we can choose to come from, at any point in time in our lives, we can come from either the core of us, love, or we can come from fear. We get to choose in any moment, everybody. This is just a matter of being a human being. We get to choose to come from love or come from fear. And we want to train at JMMB our team members to, how can we come from love more of the time, right? So obviously, that we are in support of all of the recommendations. To be honest, may I tell the truth? Gender identity one, I never think about that before. We don't have that in our policy, actually. We read that like a part of our policy. And for number 4, the education for me, it must be age appropriate. You said it in your thing, but you never say it on the PowerPoint. Okay, great. So JMMB now, so I'm telling you more about JMMB. This is our policy. We are an equal opportunity employer. JMMB provides opportunities to all qualified candidates, internal and external, regardless of race, color, religion, gender, sexual orientation, national origin, age, disability, genetic information, marital status, maternal status, or military status, right? So no matter, we're not discriminating against anybody. That's because of who we are. So that's in our policy. And furthermore, we have a zero tolerance for harassment in our policy. JMMB requires each team member to give each team member gives and receives respect and kindness, regardless of race, skin color, religious belief, gender, sexual orientation, the whole other thing again. Everybody get the point? So that's who we are. We're not going to tolerate any form of harassment, right, against no discrimination, not tolerated. And that's that's because of our values and who we say we are. So that to me is so far now, what we're working on the woman part first to organize that in terms of making sure. So we have a network that we just started. It's called the Woman Inspiration Network internally to try and make sure that at all levels of leadership, women are properly represented proportionately, right? We have a shareholder that came to every shareholders meeting, and she don't stop until she said the board must be she must see a proper representation of women on the board, right? And on our boards, that's Anatole, Clark, Allwood, and we'll be forever indebted to her because, in fact, we do have that thing now. 30% is the minimum on each board, and we really work towards that. We have equal pay, obviously. I can't imagine. It was just like automatic for us. Because we have a basis on which to pay people, and it's not your gender. Because we have a job evaluation system, and you price a job, and based on your qualification, your experience, based on your demonstrated competence, you're going to get the pay. right? So that's what we've done so far. But I think for us, just to wrap up, we really support this research. We support the recommendations in the main, as I told you the one, the age-appropriate thing. The cost for us, if we were not to do that, be who we are, first of all, if we weren't going to do that, we're going to lose some real high performers, because we have some fabulous performers at JMB, right? And we wouldn't want to be compromising that. We wouldn't be true to our values. We wouldn't be true to our values. We wouldn't stand for the greatness of all, and that's important to us. And we would be giving up. This one is a biggie. We would be giving up on the kind of Jamaica that we are standing for. The vision of the Jamaica that we are standing for. And we now give that up. Because the Jamaica that we're standing for, love and care for every single individual in our country. No discrimination. Equal opportunity. That's the Jamaica that we are standing for. So we have to demonstrate it at JMB, and we're going to continue to stand for it. So my time up. Good, done.
Thank you very much, Donna. Dr. Abrams?
So many things to say. As an obstetrician and gynecologist, I'm a member of the medical fraternity. And I'd just like to share an experience that I had a few years ago that was both disturbing and eye-opening. So I guess I'm kind of outing my own fraternity. Every year, the Medical Association of Jamaica has a conference, an annual symposium. And in 2014, I attended the symposium. And I remember walking into an ethics meeting. The hotel conference room was about twice as big as this. It was full. On the panel were a consultant radiologist, a lawyer, and a Roman Catholic priest. And I remember walking in, and this ethics session was supposed to be about HIV and ethics. When I went in there, they were talking about LGBT community. And I remember the Roman Catholic priest saying that he didn't think the LGBT community was a vulnerable community because we're all vulnerable. And I remember getting up and saying, I have a patient who is a lesbian, and she and her partner live together. They're terrorized by people in the community. They call them all kind of nasty names. Somebody in the community routinely takes his van and parks it in front of the gate to block them so they can't leave. One of them has a medical condition, and the neighbor knows about it, and she had sprayed this very toxic insecticide along the fence right by her bedroom window, and it sent her to hospital. And I said, yeah, the LGBT community is, in fact, a vulnerable community. And as the session went on, the radiologist, a colleague of mine, who heads a so-called religious group that supports family values and hosts meetings to fight against LGBT folks, used that platform to hit out against the LGBT community. And I remember sitting there, and I remember there's a question and answer session, and people came to the mic, and there were colleagues of mine, senior colleagues of mine, who went up to the mic, and they were saying very denigrating things about members of the community. I remember one went to the mic, and he said, a woman can push an 8-pound baby out of her vagina. Imagine pushing that out of an anus. These are educated people with degrees who are supposed to be looking after people. Another man went to the mic and said, I have an assignment for you to do when you go home. Put your finger in your rectum. I know this is graphic, but I'm just telling you what they said. These are my colleagues, some of them. Put your finger in your rectum and then put it in your mouth, because that's what LGBT people do. Apart from myself, only one colleague of mine got up and said anything in defense of the community. When I went to med school, I was told that health is physical, mental, and social well-being. And it was apparent to me at that time that many of my own colleagues did not care about the physical, social, or mental well-being of the community. It was disturbing to me. But in reality, I shouldn't have been surprised, because in 2008, our then Prime Minister Bruce Golding publicly said that he would not have gays in his cabinet, and in doing so, he legitimized discrimination, job discrimination against the LGBT community. We have a serious problem in this country. There's a serious lack of empathy towards members of the community. I'm very active in social media, and it has been a learning platform for me to see what is out there. And I remember recently posting a story about a lesbian who was raped by her father and her uncle and a friend of her uncle's. And one of the comments in the thread came from someone who professes to be a devout Christian. And his comment on that was that these people are too nasty with their nasty lifestyles. And he wasn't a rapist. It was directed at a lesbian. And we do have a serious problem. And I'm just grateful for forums like this in which we can interact with and educate the public, and hopefully we can get more empathy and justice for members of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists. Before we go any further, the first question that we have on Slido, where may we access copies of the full study and summary reports referenced by Dr. King? First off, let me apologize for not having the report available to all members of the audience. The report will be available in a few weeks, and it will be placed on our website for download and viewing. I'm going to go to the next question on Slido, which I think is going to go to Dr. King. What is the total amount of money or estimate lost to Jamaica because of LGBT discrimination?
We declined to create one large sum because we wanted to make it clear that there are so many levels to the economic cost, and there are so many aspects of it, that anywhere that you draw the circle would end up being arbitrary. But we did want to communicate clearly that this is not a negligible cost. So as much as in our minds we would like to marginalize the LGBT community, in terms of the impact on our economy and society, you can't marginalize that. It's a significant cost, at least 1% of GDP, and depending on how many sort of tiers you want to go in terms of the knock-on effects, much larger than that.
Terry, you had mentioned the media earlier, and there is a question here: can the media do more to remove discriminatory and demeaning lyrics from our music? But going beyond just the media, what can private groups such as, you know, the Medical Doctors Association, the media houses, how do we really start that conversation to start changing or, you know, addressing the attitudes that people may have?
I think everything has to do with messaging. I think media prides itself as being this massive platform that helps to mold and shape the minds of the, you know, the society. And I think when you have that, or when you boast about it, that gives you a lot of responsibility. And I think over the years, and I think even I might have been a victim when I was a lot younger, is that all the messaging that surrounds or is related to the LGBT community, we always see them as one particular thing. Or when articles are written about them or stories are written about them, it's always in a very negative light. We do not highlight the LGBT community as the professionals that they are, the creative geniuses that Dr. King spoke about earlier. We do not hear about those members. We do not see them, and unless we follow them on their personal platforms, we do not know them. And so when we tolerate media or any channel, music, whatever, and that becomes a part of our community that says that this community is nasty, this community is this community is, then naturally it will help to shape and mold the views of other persons. And so I do believe that the media has a responsibility to be balanced. I'm not saying everything is positive about the community. So if you're going to do it, at least be objective and be balanced in everything.
Donald, just along to you, as a member of the PSOJ right now, they're leading the discourse for the government for the issues on crime. What role can the PSOJ play in, you know, addressing these?
Well, I never think about that. How quickly? No, I'm sure we can. There's a great role to play. And what I'll do is we'll make sure that, as I know Keith, that is my brother, he's leading the PSOJ now. And yeah, and I know that there's so I think we can make sure, I don't know, I'll have to double check on that. But it can be included. You know what it is, man?
Well, it's interesting though, because one of our recommendations is that private businesses proactively take on the kind of mantra and the kind of thing that GMMB has done. So really what we're trying to do is how do we get other companies to explicitly address this issue in the way that GMMB has.
What I was going to say is that I think it's just hypocritical, as in not all companies. But I think they like to put these beautiful things in, and we just have a few companies that actually do it. They like to sound good. Right now, I think a lot of communities are trying, companies are talking about diversity, and they're trying to be all cool like Google, and they're trying to, tell people that they can come in jeans and, Converse, and they think that that is a way of being progressive. They tell you that they've hired millennials, and all of a sudden that makes them progressive, but yet still they still skirt. So they're doing all of these cool things that make their businesses and companies seem really, amazing and transformative, when really and truly it's not. And so I think they really need to stop talking about it and using it like it's a buzzword, and actually making it a part of their policy and how they treat their operations within their companies. Point blank.
What we actually have training called the GMMB Way, where we help our team members to get in touch with the greatness inside of them and recognize that they can honor the greatness in them and the greatness in each other people, right? So that is the basis on which if you're coming from that place, then you're going to come from love and not from fear. But I mean, as human beings, so we do training in that, right? Coming like the whole of Jamaica needs some good training, right? Yes or no? In terms of, I'm serious about discrimination is coming from fear. It's coming from fear and not coming from love. And if you talk to a Jamaican, most Jamaican people say they are into love. Sure. You know what I mean? So we need to have a real serious values conversation and really a reckoning with ourselves. You understand what I'm saying, guys? Because it don't come in, it just not come in. Discrimination, there's no basis for it.
Michael,
right?
Sorry, Michael, I just want to bring you in here. You have given your experience at that, conference a few years back. How do we, and it was a very negative experience, but how do we start among the medical practitioners, start trying to address that issue given, the barriers to accessing healthcare for this community?
I think we need to engage the leadership of the various medical organizations to be more proactive. Because as I said, health is physical, mental, and social well-being. And being LGBT in Jamaica, you're at risk for all those aspects of your health to be not as good as they ought to be. It's a great concern of mine. And I have to say this, and I'm not painting all these people with the same brush, but religion is a major barrier to justice for LGBT in this country. And when I say that, I don't paint all Christians with the same brush, because the LGBT advocate I probably admire the most is in fact not just a Christian but clergy. A friend of mine, Sean Major Campbell, is an Anglican priest, and he's a Christian. So it's not all religious folks. But it can be a barrier. And I give you an example. You asked me about the medical fraternity and how it can interact with this whole religious thing. Recently, there's a senior colleague of mine who actually was a president of the Medical Association of Jamaica, who is very religious. And he had posted something about praying for all kind of evil things. And he had these hashtags. One was for pedophiles, hashtag rapists, hashtag LGBT community. And I called him out and I said, listen, if you're you have a right to your opinions, but if you're gonna put LGBT folks with these kind of people, please do not tag me or put it on my page. And there are many people who consistently will say sin is sin. And once they consider it to be a sin, they're gonna link innocent, loving LGBT folks with people who murder and rape others. And it's something we have to address. We just have to, it's like the elephant in the room. People don't want to talk about religion sometimes, but it can be and is a major barrier to justice for these people. And that's something that we have to address. There has to be a pushback. So when people talk about LGBT folks and murderers and rapists, there has to be a pushback. You have to tell them, no, you need to stop doing that.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from the audience. If the audience member is here, Mr. Glenroy Murray, are you in the audience? Can we get a mic, please? Mr. Murray, if you'd like to.
I think I'm getting it.
Hi. Yes, it is. So my question was, what areas of research do you think is needed in this area, but particularly kind of talk about the areas of, or the costs that the study was not able to quantify? So I guess that's to Dr. King.
Is anybody in particular you'd like to address the question?
Dr. King.
Okay.
Yeah. There were parts of it that were difficult to quantify. So all of the costs that we actually gave were what we estimated to be the minimum cost, because the extent to which people are less productive than they otherwise might be because they are not in a job they want to have, or they're trying to small up themselves in the organization, that's difficult to quantify. And we suspect that that's a significant cost. So those and others.
I'm going to go to the next question. If the audience member is present and would like to ask it, have attempts to change the decency laws been made, and if so, why did they fail? Is the audience member in the room or would like to ask? Okay, Javon, I'm going to pose that question to you. I mean, in your advocacy role, do you know if any attempts have been changed to change the law has been made and why they failed along the way?
Right. So I think the person is referring to the gross indecency provision, which is contained in the Offenses Against the Persons Act, which hopefully Glenroy won't be me. I think it's 79 of the Offenses Against the Person Act. So typically what we refer to as the buggery law is in the Offenses Against the Person Act, which is section 76, 77, and 79, as was shown by Dr. King. Yes, so a number of efforts have been implemented over the years to make to encourage political will to change the laws. So for example, in 2001, very shortly after JFLAG was launched, there was a presentation to the Jamaican Parliament about the law and the impact it has on people. In the recent discussions around the Sexual Offences Act and other related acts, which included the Offences Against the Persons Act, there were lots and lots of submission from civil society persons as well as individuals which recommended to the government to to amend the law or to repeal the law. Sadly, as many of you may know, the report suggests that that should not be done and that it should be put to referendum instead, so that the Jamaican people can make a decision on that, because they believe it is hugely controversial, and so they're sort of skirting around and playing on the prejudices of the Jamaican people. Notwithstanding, some of you might also know that there is currently a challenge before the Jamaican court, which was brought by Maurice Tomlinson about 2 or so years ago to actually have the law repealed or amended. That has not been heard as yet, because there were lots and lots of deliberation about the public defender joining the case, and some churches joined the case. I think maybe 10 or 13 of them. Quite a number of them joined the case. And so once that is already before the courts, and they should begin to hear submissions for the case very soon, I imagine. There's also a petition launched at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights regarding changes to the buggery law.
Okay, thank you very much. Is Kavor Brown in the audience? Kavor? Would you like to ask your question? Okay, I guess the one that has been voted up, that is directed towards Dr. King.
So, commendations to you, good sir, Dr. King.
Thank you.
Expound further on Capri's survey, which concluded that more than half of respondent employers stated that they will not employ LGBT persons. I just want numbers. What is the entire research sample, and what was the research method?
That research was not conducted by us. We were quoting research that was conducted by JFLAG.
No, so the research was commissioned by JFLAG. That's from the 2012 study. It's by no means representative of the entire business community. It was a small sample. I can't recall the number right now, but it was less than 30 persons who were from the business community who were surveyed.
Okay.
Can I ask the next?
Is that okay? Kavor?
I have a question for Javian. Let me find it. Given your experience, Mr. Nelson, what would you say about government's reception about research that quantifies sexuality-based discrimination?
Well, I think we have an opportunity now in that we are pursuing lots and lots of initiatives around economic progress for the country, and that we have a space in which more and more of our leaders clearly understand that they have a responsibility to the Jamaican public. And so I think it's about how do we leverage research like this to help them understand in a much more succinct and clear way what the challenges are for the LGBT community, what the impact is on the LGBT community, and importantly, the impact on our country, because if it is that we are actually trying to pursue economic progress and to get 5 in 4, for example, and for Jamaica to be this place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business, and to attract foreign direct investments and stuff, then it means that we have to begin to look at all the ways in which the challenges faced by the country is impacting on that progress, and that includes the LGBT community. What are the issues faced by the community, and how can they respond as a government, and how can they encourage and facilitate greater investment and more businesses, and to encourage and engender change for the LGBT community for the good of Jamaica.
Okay. There's a question here that I'm going to throw out to any of the panelists who would like to answer it, and I think it's actually a very interesting question. Is there any kind of research that addresses attitudes towards the LGBTQ community based on their social status? Is there any research that addresses the attitudes towards LGBTQ persons based on their social status? So is this something that is considered when reports are being done or surveys are being done to see the various attitudes based on class? Anyone want to take that help?
So from the research that we have seen and over the years, there's no such study that would have included the experiences based on socioeconomic status. However, very representative studies. However, when we look, for example, in 2013, we had done an analysis of a number of the reports of discrimination, violence, etc., that were reported to us at JFLAG about the challenges people face, and we noted from those research that those who face harsh discrimination and those who face violence were typically from poorer communities. They were already marginalized. So we know from a lot of the studies, which are often qualitative studies, that those who experience severe discrimination and violence are often from lower socioeconomic groups. They are the ones who are least able to bounce back, the ones who do not have the wherewithal to get assistance. So for example, someone who is kicked out of their home, if you have a good job, if you're displaced from your community, you can easily find alternative support, you can migrate, etc., because maybe you already have a visa, you can pay your plane fare, etc. But those who are from lower socioeconomic groups, typically, their experiences are oftentimes exacerbated as a result of their economic status as well.
Okay. I'm going to throw this one out to the panelists. We're going to be short on time shortly. Crime has been a very big issue for us. We've seen where PSOJ has kind of forced a conversation with the recent anti-crime summit that took place. What do you think is needed to kind of push that, to really push that change in the discourse across the communities? Javon, and then just go down the line. What do you think that big thing is that is going to be needed to get that discourse across?
So I think the big thing really is our conception of justice and how we begin to address that. So for example, if you look at a number of research that has been done right across the country, the 2016 study, for example, by JFLAG entitled Developmental Cost of Homophobia. If you look on the Office of the Children's Registry research about child abuse, it shows that a number of people are very, very unwilling to go forward to make a report to the police. They feel that if they make the report, nothing will come of it, that they'll be further victimized, that it's not their business, etc. And so if it is that we actually need to begin to address the challenges of crime and violence in the country, one of the important things is going to have to be, how do we ensure greater cooperation between the police and the citizenry so that people who who have their rights violated, who face any kind of harm for whatever reason, can actually make a report, and that those who have information can actually provide that information to the police and the authorities to deal with, to facilitate investigations.
I think to answer a question like this, it can't be any one thing, in my opinion. I think it has to be the convergence of a lot of things. Like Javion just mentioned one of them. I think people need to be held accountable. Even when we're speaking about the hierarchy and those persons who are in leadership positions and positions of authority, these people need to be held accountable. Meaning, regardless of whether somebody is from the LGBTQ community or not, if this person is a victim of a crime, especially because of it being, discriminatory, then the person who is the perpetrator has to be held accountable. I don't think we see that because, again, as Javion was saying, there's this concept of justice. We don't speak about children being molested. We kind of cover up perpetrators of other crimes, but we will march out in the streets against homosexuality. I think we need to just kind of say once and for all, victimization goes across the board, and whoever is a perpetrator is going to be held to the full extent of the law, period.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Damien?
No, skip me.
Oh, no, okay.
Yeah, okay. I was really intrigued, always been intrigued by a truth and reconciliation process. And I really believe that as a country, we need to engage in that kind of real talking about the whole thing. So, I'm a Christian, right? And but how I see it is that I am called to love everybody. You know what I'm saying? So I interpret my Christianity require me to love everybody. I really think this is a conversation we need to have in this country. Really now, let's just confront, sit down, face to face. Like, have some people that are against, some people are for. That kind of conversation. And that has to be designed. We need to have it. We need to put it on the table and have the conversation. That's what I believe. Because we really, ultimately, is mindset change. It's ultimately mindset change. And I think, to be honest with you, the attitudes are changing. We have to make sure we're measuring that too. Because they are changing, and we kind of maybe stuck in thinking, Jamaica this, Jamaica that. You know what I mean? So that is changing too. Because how many of us have people that are so inclined in our family? And well, if we know, not true. So I think that we have to confront the thing and be real about the thing. So I would like to work on that. Okay? So I am into that. Make put the thing on the table and really have the real conversation. That's what I'm saying.
Michael, over to you.
I think we need more public education about sexuality in general. So this comprehensive sex education thing is extremely important. There are some people who want to bury their heads in the sand and say, just don't talk to kids about that. It should be just abstinence only, and abstinence only programs do not work. The thing about kids and sex is that this age we're living in now is very different. When I was in primary, when I was in prep school, there's no way I could see anything pornographic or graphically sexual. Kids in primary and prep school are seeing these things now. We have to have these conversations. And I find there's a lot of ignorance about sexuality in general. For example, recently, a pastor told his congregation that doggy-style sex is evil, and dildos invite demons into your home. And some people actually believe these kind of things. And what I find with LGBT stuff is there's a whole lot of ignorance. So, for example, when people say a rainbow flag, they jump straight to anal sex. And it's all about that. So sometimes I'll post things about the LGBT community that they jump straight to that, and that's where they focus. I'm a gynecologist. All of my patients are women. And many of these women engage in anal sex and love it. And there are some gay men who do not engage in anal sex. So we have to have these conversations. They may be uncomfortable for some people, but people have to understand an LGBT person is more than anal sex. And many times it does not even involve that. And what I find with the ignorance, for example, if I have patients who are lesbian in lesbian relationships, you'll have some women saying that is nasty. And heterosexual women, you're heterosexual, right?
Yeah.
Heterosexual women, I'm just asking, heterosexual women are at a greater risk of contracting STIs than lesbians are. Heterosexual women are at a greater risk of getting cervical cancer than lesbians are. Lesbian women tend to have better sex lives than heterosexual women, and that's been shown by research. I didn't say anything about you. I'm sorry, I didn't. No, don't take it personally. I'm just saying that research has shown that their sex lives tend to be more fulfilled. And we need to have these discussions. Some of these are very uncomfortable. Some people don't want to hear these things. But there needs to be more education about sexuality in general.
What I think we need to be doing, which is what we are doing, that to the extent the majority of the population or your significant parts of the population that want to marginalize the LGBT community, what we have to avoid doing is marginalizing the issue. And so conversations like this very one and any other forum in which we can do that, we have to make sure that the issue is front and center so that even gradually the society has to confront the issue. And in that way, we make incremental progress.
May I just add one more thing? Just kind of piggybacking on what Mikey said. Two of the recommendations were that this conversation needs to be a comprehensive curriculum in schools. But we also spoke about the training for your guidance counselors and all the other persons who are going to be in contact with kids. Having a massive community of members of the LGBT community, a lot of them usually fear their parents. Usually the problems stem from the relationship or the lack of relationship they have with their parents. My daughter is 7, and last month she asked me, "Mommy, what would you do if I told you I was gay?" Now, I've never had the conversation with her. I've spoken to her about menstrual cycles, about bodies, about people touching. I've had all of those conversations, and this was the first time she was initiating this conversation about sexuality, not from a boy to a girl and a girl to a boy, but she was now speaking about the possibility of being a lesbian, and she was interested in knowing what would my reaction be to her. And I think a part of the conversation and having these discussions have to involve parents and how we deal with these questions and when our children tell us. So my answer to her was, "My darling, whatever it is you decide to do with your life, whoever you decide to love, just know that Mommy will be here. Mommy will be here for all your questions. Mommy will be here to love you and protect you." But the fact of the matter is that most Jamaican parents probably will never tell their children that. And so I think that needs to be a part of also the unlearn, relearn stages of not just society, but parents to children relationship. I think it's extremely important and it cannot be overlooked.
Yeah, it's definitely something. I mean, we're in a social media era right now where kids have access to everything. And I mean, it's definitely better if they're hearing it from the home rather than out there with misconceptions flying around. So I'm going to ask one more question from Slido. Unfortunately, we don't have time for all of these questions. Terry, question for Dr. Reed. What is it that we can do about dance hall artists, young people, the idols, who sing lyrics directed towards members of the LGBT community? So how do we...
You know, guys, I would love to tell you, I mean, if you find answer, you tell me. I think the problem with how we deal and treat the LGBT community is a part of the ingrained culture that we have. And we have to understand that even though we have an overarching culture, which is Jamaican, we also have subcultures. And when you have different types of families, different type of relationships, different types of socio-economic barriers and boundaries, when you have all of these things going on, coupled with the fact that we just don't like that particular culture, it makes it very easy for that particular type of artist to do that sort of music and to get stripes for it. The bigger and badder you are, and the more you ostracize that particular community, the more stripes you get. And they benefit more from it. Now, will we ever be able to stop that? I don't know. I really don't know. It's almost as difficult as answering the question, will the government ever change the buggery law?
Sure.
That is where I have the two of them. Dancehall is the art of music where people think that, you know, you can say what you want to say and it represents the people. And so it's going to be very difficult to censor what some people think in that particular area of music and culture.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to start wrapping up, and I'm going to start from Michael and work the way down the line. 2 minutes, just your final thoughts.
I'd just like to thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. And we need more forums like this. We need more opportunities to interface with the public, encourage dialogue, and to just encourage empathy, really. I think there's a glaring lack of empathy and understanding regarding the community. And I think we just need more forums like this. And we need to engage more of our parents and more kids. Find a way to engage children, because they're learning about sexuality from sources that we didn't want to know about some of that stuff. They're learning from it elsewhere, but we need to engage our kids and teach them to be more tolerant and empathetic and to educate them.
Okay. Donald?
Okay. I think that I'm very happy for this forum and happy to be invited to be here and represent and stand up and say, it is possible, and here's a company that's doing this, okay? And we encourage everybody, and I take that charge that as a PSOJ we need to see how we can encourage other companies to do this, right? The other thing is that I believe strongly in my country, Jamaica. And I believe that love is at the core of who we are as Jamaicans, regardless of how we are manifesting, okay? And I want us to have conversations that challenge these behaviors that are inconsistent with love. So I'm really up to having more of these conversations where we confront these behaviors that are inconsistent with being a one love country. Come here, stand for Jamaica, a one love country. You understand what I'm saying, guys? So who is with me? Come, make we stand for Jamaica as a one love country. Yeah, understand what I'm saying? Full stop.
David?
I'm going to use my wrap-up time to address a question raised on Slido, because it actually is the bookend to how I started the presentation. Comment on Slido is that not all economic benefits are worth pursuing. And that is true. The economic benefits of slavery is not a relevant question. The economic benefits of violating civil rights is not worth pursuing, because civil rights are fundamental, human rights are fundamental. And that is why I started the presentation by saying that we are articulating the economic cost is not to say that economic cost is the important issue. The important issue is that this is a matter of human rights. But we are pointing out nonetheless that if you are insisting on violating the human rights of 7% of your population, it is also costing you.
Okay, thank you. Terry?
For me, just generally, we just need to stop being hypocritical, you know? When people need blood transfusion, they send around these WhatsApp broadcasts and they want everybody to come in and give blood. And for somebody who didn't like the LGBT community, when I got a WhatsApp broadcast about blood, I had to ask them, I said, I have a very large LGBT community. I said, would you take their blood? Or you don't want their blood? And they said, we'll take the blood. My problem is that we cannot be selective with how we choose to accept them and reject them. And again, I will just repeat what I said earlier. They cannot do it by themselves. So they need heterosexuals who have platforms, who have people listening, who have policymakers and legislators that will listen to them. We need to step up, not just in public spaces, but in private spaces, because they need their allies, and they will not be able to do it. So we have a responsibility just to be decent human beings and decent citizens where our LGBT community are concerned.
So I think to start off, I'll say that Jamaicans, I've found, are very, very reasonable people. I think we are a rights-conscious country, despite what a lot of people say. Many years ago, Jamaica took leadership on a number of human rights issues, and we were at the forefront for fighting for human rights for a number of marginalized people. So I think we need to have more conversations like these, smaller conversations, conversations for change, so that we can begin to engender change for our society so that all of us can feel like we belong. Everyone can feel like they can walk on the street and not have to worry that someone might violate their rights for whatever reason. Without any kind of distinction, we need to help our Jamaican people to understand about human rights. I find that's going to be dependent upon us having that conversation in a way that all of us can understand, not from a sort of Western way in talking about rights, but in a very Jamaican way to talk about kindness and respect and love and tolerance, that we can all appreciate each other. We have to work together to protect the rights that we all enjoy and protect the rights that some people do not enjoy. We have to begin to work together and support each other and to encourage each other to respect and to show love and to show empathy, because without that, we're going to continue to have all the challenges we're having in society, where a number of people from different groups, the LGBT community, women and girls, people who are from inner city communities, people who are from rural Jamaica, do not feel like they belong here and do not feel like that they can live and thrive in a Jamaican society that's working towards becoming a better place for everyone. And I think what the change is going to be dependent upon people taking leadership. And I sincerely hope that after today, we can see leadership from the PSOJ to begin to show that we can actually do something as a country, regardless of what the law says. The law doesn't say anything about paternity leave, but we're not taking leadership in that. So regardless of what the law says, the business community can take leadership. The business community can demonstrate that we can take action as a country so that all of us, regardless of our sexual orientation or religious beliefs, the political party that we support or don't support, etc., regardless of our gender identity, we can all belong, that we can all find a place to work, a place to live, a place to raise our families, do business, and retire when we come of age. Thank you.
Okay.
So when we first circulated the flyer with all of our panelists, a lot of the comments we got were, what a great panel, what a great group. And I think that they lived up to all those expectations. Thank you all so much for participating, for being here. We're really glad that we were able to bring everyone together. We, of course, thank again our donor partners, the European Union, for not only funding us, but for giving us the room to really do what we thought was necessary to bring the report to life. And thank you to all of you, our audience, for being here, for joining us this evening. We do have refreshments afterwards, I think, outside, to reward you for coming. We do have another report being launched very soon about cryptocurrency, so please look out for that one, yes? So you can expand your knowledge, not just beyond the economic cost of homophobia, but what cryptocurrency regulation is going to look like. It's very exciting. So thank you again, and have a good evening.